Welcome in, everybody, to TASL2 NA Week 6. The finale is finally upon us. FTWin versus Starburst, our top two seeds, are both in the playoffs already, but they're still going to come out today and put on a great show for you all. My name is NineWholeGrains. I am your streamer today, as well as a commentator, and I am joined by my friend Dr. Prodigy, who, last time we casted together, Prod, I think we had a little too much fun.
I don't know if you can ever have too much fun while casting some of the best Japanese Splatoon players in the world and best Splatoon players in the world. So I'm going to call sus on that accusation.
Already calling sus. Oh, I love it. This is this is going to be a really fun set. It's going to be a great time watching these two. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the maps here shortly that the players are going to be going on today, but just as a reminder here for everyone, these two do have a storied rivalry here. In the most recent NA Open, a fantastic 4-3 set between these two that I know for a fact Starburst wants another crack at them. We expect to see some good play coming from them here today, but I know, Prod, you and I were talking a little bit earlier about how Starburst not only has something to prove here to the world, but they might not be coming in the best of shape either.
Yeah, so Jared was an integral part of the roster for as the part of the original lineup, but then wasn't around for some of their matches. So and is now returning for this match. So I don't know the exact state of their practice. Have they been practicing with Silver? Been practicing with Jared? Does that change their comps that they've been practicing? So on and so forth. There's just a lot of variables there. Regardless, it's still a very strong team. We're still expecting a close match here overall. At least I am. But it's some unknowns that we'll have to kind of figure out as the games develop.
It is indeed, and I think on the other end too, of course it's not the exact rosters that we saw last time. Shaq isn't going to be here for FTWin, so anytime you look at two teams that have played against each other, when there are these small shifts, they are something that has to be considered when looking at the full page. But I'm going to go ahead and show you here the maps. I think we're still waiting. A couple of the counter picks may have changed. For those of you unfamiliar with the way that this counter pick system works, there are 3 maps each time that are the neutrals. You can see that there they are. The ones in pink, Splat Zones on the Reef, Rainmaker on Blackbelly Skatepark, and Tower Control on Ancho-V Games is what I'm seeing so far. We're just getting confirmation to make sure that these are all correct. But the players also get to decide for each team some counter picks on their end, and I think that that's kind of a really interesting way to do these best of nines. And Prod, you are a real scientist when it comes to structuring different events. Yeah, we already got one out. But I know that you've been, a big proponent of trying different structures for different, not only full events, but even specific exhibition sets. Do you like the way this is structured?
I think so overall. Besides the fact that the 6th map is still being determined, it is an interesting format. So some strengths. I'll talk a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses of this format. First of all, you still kind of have to be ready for a bunch of different things, right? You don't exactly know what you're going to be playing up until the match is officially scheduled. At the same time, since you know what teams are exactly going to be participating, you can kind of prep a little bit better than if you were just entering a standard tournament that has standard, picks and counter picks. So there's cool things you can do there. One thing that I'm interested that I've been seeing just across the NA TASL. I haven't really been watching the EU TASL matches very much, but for the NA ones, I noticed there's been a lot more tower control lately, which is I actually find very surprising because NA teams like to just fight nonstop. And so, of course, now we're starting to see more tower control because they're kind of realizing even though the mode sucks, it actually benefits their playstyle. So that's one interesting conclusion that you can kind of really draw from this. But I really think this format really only works if you know exactly what teams are going to be playing and when. Otherwise, it kind of falls apart. So it's a good choice by the people that set this up to go with this type of format, and has really been for some interesting matches.
So another thing as we wait for this, I know, again, we're still getting the maps put up here. Appreciate your patience, everybody. You have an interesting perspective as kind of the coach of a team who has played both of these. And I think arguably your team's best performances were against these two teams. So, as someone who's been on the inside against both of these teams, both as a coach and as a player, what are your insights? Why do you think that your team did well against both of these two? Is there something specifically about each that you guys think you had figured out? It is not easy to take games from FTWin, and yet you guys managed to take a handful.
Yeah, there's a lot going on right now. If I am being honest, I think that the level of NA Splatoon is at one of its weakest points in Splatoon 2 history. Like since it reached a peak years ago, it is at one of its lowest points in terms of the overall quality of play. I think that across the board, the teams that consistently are at the top are making very obvious mistakes that they're not being punished for right now in NA because everyone's making the same kind of mistakes. Now, that's not about any one particular players on each individual teams. It's just from an overall standpoint that things. I think it's kind of the best way to say it is that maybe things aren't being taken as seriously right now, which is understandable. I mean, we're living in a crazy, it's a crazy year. Things are crazy across the world. So, it's definitely understandable. But I really do think that the overall quality of play on a team level is very low. What isn't very low is the quality of play on an individual level. I think the individual play is actually pretty high. And that's part of the reason why Slaughterhouse was able to take some games off of these teams. A lot of people thought we were just going to get 5-0'd. So I think that's what it really kind of boils down to. I think we're starting to see, especially as Bocat, who isn't playing in TASL, but is essentially a team made up of a bunch of different TASL players. What we're actually seeing is that you can actually play all these other different weapons and succeed very dominantly doing that. And so we're starting to see things like Kensa Jr. come out of nowhere for TASL and starting to do really well, and all these other really weird picks like Octobrushes and things. So I think that's really kind of the state of things right now, is that people are kind of focusing more on individual play than team play. And so as a result, the quality of the games are just low. But I think that's really what it kind of boils down to. I do have to really talk to the individual teams to get any more granular than that. But that's really the trend that I'm seeing right now.
Well, thank you to you for that beautiful description of that, and thank you to Kiver as well for the raid here. Welcome in, everybody. We are just about getting ready to start. Prod and I are kind of filling time as we are wont to do as we wait for the teams. It is going to be FTWin on the Alpha side and Starburst on the other side this time. If that is wrong, I'll make sure to get that changed, but I do believe it's been communicated to the teams. And to build off something that you talked about there, Prod, this idea of the quality of team play versus the individual play. I think that that's such an interesting part to go to, because when you get to this level and when you get to teams that are at this, I think for a lot of viewers, the two sort of become almost conflated. It becomes a battle of, okay, well, they've executed really well, so that must mean that their team is really good. And I think that that's not always the case necessarily. It's so difficult, I think, on a macro level to break down why the players are in the position they are and decide, was that a deliberate team decision, or was that just the player understanding where they needed to be when they needed to be there? And so I'm curious, again, from someone who's coached that and really looked at this, at what point do you have to rein in those players? Is there ever a moment where, I will use Taylor, for example, someone who we're both pretty familiar with, is there ever a moment where you have to tell Taylor, hey, this is clearly you're playing incredibly well, we're winning some games, but rein it in a little bit? Like, at what point does the team plan, rather, come in before what the player is kind of feeling at that moment?
Yeah, and that's actually that's a really good. I don't know if you've been studying your VODs or what, but you actually picked a really good example by picking up Taylor out of for the situation. But so if you go back and look at the Slaughterhouse versus FTWin match, a lot of the games that Slaughterhouse won were relatively close games. I think there was 2 clan games where we won at like the last second. Only the first tower control game did Slaughterhouse win pretty convincingly. And then a lot of the other games that were either close or FTWin won, Taylor in each of those close games has very key moments during those games. And those key moments are, and without fail, he holds forward and somehow manages to get a very clutch trade or a double or triple kill. And if those things don't happen, then FTWin gets total map control and is able to set up. So it's one of those things where Taylor goes in and gets all these kills or gets these trades, but it doesn't really reflect anything in terms of Slaughterhouse suddenly, making this big, objective push or scoring a lot. So he doesn't really seem noticeable. But if you think about what if he dies here and doesn't get these trades, then you suddenly realize, wait, FTWin has control of the entire map. So it's those little moments like that where you kind of see it play out. Another good example would be Bran on Starburst. Again, when Starburst played Slaughterhouse, Bran dropped over 100 kills over the course of that series, just absolute monster, right? And it's not so much that Bran was carrying; it was just that it was that's just the kind of the style that these teams are going for right now, right? I would say overall that Slaughterhouse is trying not to do that style, but at the same time, if that's what kind of the meta, quote unquote, is you kind of have to play to that meta to a certain extent. So those, if anyone wants to learn about that stuff, go back and watch those. Look for those kind of plays where people are just holding forward and getting trades or getting those key picks and see okay, he got 3 kills, but what does that really mean? And you really will start to see these kind of continuous patterns emerge.
See, Prod, this is why I love casting with you. Just breaking these things down in such a concise way. Because believe me, even though I know Prod and I are taking turns here talking for 5 minutes with these questions and discussions, this is a topic that you can go on forever and ever and ever and try to identify, well, why did this happen here? Why did this happen there? And all of the fine minutia of this. This is a really fast-paced game. I think sometimes people kind of forget that when it comes to a team game, and we get so wrapped up in the meta. We like this weapon, we like that weapon, we don't like this weapon, we don't like that strategy, and we forget that it is a radically fast-paced game, and a game where every single player, every single inkling on the map has the power to completely turn around situations, and that's not something that you see in a ton of other games. And it's one of the reasons why I continue to come back.
Yeah, it's very fluid, and it's something you come in with a game plan, but it's actually in games like this, I would say a game like Splatoon, or a game, to put it in a PC shooter type of comparison to something that came out recently, Diabolical, which is kind of based off of games like Quake or Unreal Tournament. Those are fast-paced arena shooters that are caring more about reaction time. How fast can you react mechanically, but also how fast can you react on a strategic mental level of envisioning, okay, what exactly is happening? What is the other team trying to do? And what do I need to do to enable my team to play against whatever the other team's trying to do? And it's changing from the first minute of the game to the last minute of the game. You could go through, countless different scenarios where that situation changes, and you have to change the action of what you normally do. So the best teams are good at not only carrying out their plan, but adapting their plan. I think that's ultimately one of the big reasons why consistently we see Japan dominate EU and NA. And the reason why Boca in particular is actually seeing success against Japan is because they're not playing to these preconceived notions.
All right, everybody, we are finally into our first game here. FTWin versus Starburst. A reminder, both of these teams have already punched their ticket into the playoffs here. This is purely a seeding match, but should be great all the same. Starting off on Reef Splat Zones, taking a look at what the teams are bringing in here. I think really the only one that sticks out to me at the start here is Bran on that L3D. Do you think that this is this a new thing for him? I've started to see this weapon creep back into the meta.
So I think typically we see it creep back in the meta because of armor-based comps and just burst bombs in general being pretty strong to kind of just chip away and things trying to set up, especially against Nautilus armor comps. Really makes it kind of annoying for the Nautilus to deal with. So the idea here isn't so much just to hold forward and try to get kills, it's to kind of poke and poke and poke until you get an inkjet and then poke even more. In a game like this on Reef, overall that strategy works pretty well. But I'm not sure if it's going to work well against the comp that FTWin is running here. So we'll have to see how it plays out.
And I like that you brought up kind of that poke and chip damage style. One of the kind of like defining moments for me, at least in thinking about this game, was one time I heard Kyo, as almost a throwaway comment, talk about doing damage without taking damage, and the concept of poking. Anyone who comes from fighting games can really understand what that means and how important the idea of a simple jab is. But in Splatoon, I think it applies really well to things like burst bombs, and like you said, doing these small bits of damage here, moving people around and getting it into a state where it does become almost unstable. I think any team can get it set up and get in the position they want, but only the good ones can really force their way back in if you knock them off that perch.
Yeah, definitely. And I think this is probably going to be the issue that Starburst is about to encounter here, right? They just burnt 3 specials in an attempt to do a takeback, and they didn't even get a penalty on the zone. And so now they have to kind of build up the specials again. They get a nice pick, though, to kind of open this up and get a call off of the second one. So, I mean, it ends up working out in their favor. I think that was more of a misplay by FTWin rather than Starburst making a play. What Starburst can do, though, is that because of the fact that they didn't have the specials to do a take to re-get the middle of the map, now they have specials to maintain the pressure. They're seeing this inkjet come out, right? And now suddenly FTWin has to play in the back foot. So landing a sick shot right there, and it just stalls it out even more. So some really interesting issues coming here, where I was talking about earlier. FTWin on the team level makes a mistake. Someone gets picked off early, which makes it so Starburst doesn't have to use specials to get into the middle of the map. And then we're seeing the cascade of that effect based off of individual play.
Yeah, Kyo got taken out earlier by it looked like a rogue burst bomb. That shot that comes in here from Rin, you see they're able to run in now, but only with one pick down on the other side. Ice is going to be able to reposition here, and it's almost another trade right here in the center. I don't know if they have anybody here who's going to be able to get any paint. There's 3 people shooting the zone, trying desperately to hold on to it. Just need one pick, one jump in, puts down Biscuit for a good measure. And what a fantastic take back. They only needed it once, Prod. Starburst going up 1-0.
Yeah, I mean, textbook, right? Textbook example of what we were talking about beforehand. You know, we have this really solid, FTWin hold happening. Someone gets picked, it spirals, all because of not having to use specials. The specials get used at FTWin's base instead, stalls it out even more. Key individual play of getting a pick extends it even more, so on and so forth. So it's really, we're playing out exactly like a lot of these other TASL matches and then they have played out. So it's a really good play on both sides. It's not like, that pick that happened wasn't, like a huge, massive mistake in terms of, oh, this player is so bad, but more so just it has a huge, massive impact on the outcome of the game.
Yeah, it's so easy, I think, for people to look at one big, dominating hold between these two teams and say, oh, this match was dominated by this player. But, for all the talks about how swingy some of the modes are, splat zones can get away from you so quickly. And when the margin of error is so thin at this level, just one pick going one way, or Brand's one shot right there that extended that stall a little bit more. Suddenly the desperation comes back in. Suddenly you aren't able to set up exactly how you want to. 5 seconds can really be the difference between building that 4th special or having to go in with 3. And again, it's just one of the reasons why we can continue to look at these games over and over and still find new things. But to a point you made earlier here, Prod, tower control. We're going to be seeing a lot of it here. You and I, very outspoken tower control haters. What do you think FTWin is looking for here?
I'm looking for them to. I mean, both teams are going to have the same strategy, but FTWin in particular, I think they're going to stick to their armor-based comps. They're not probably going to be running a backline or have the pseudo backline in the Nautilus, and they're just going to try to take a lot of fights and really just try to snowball it. Tower control. Everyone likes to give crap to Rainmaker about how oh, you lose one fight and it's GG. Nah, tower control is the true snowball mode, and I know a lot of the top players kind of agree. So it's really about winning one big fight and then just kind of chaining that big fight into a bunch of smaller fights while the tower keeps pushing. Something that I actually want to point out too as this game starts up is, as again we're seeing these kind of same comp coming out of FTWin, is the fact that Toon is playing a K-shot and rather not an armor weapon, which is what we're normally used to seeing from him. And I actually don't even know if Toon's really been playing that much. I believe that FTWin's been playing more of Bagel or practicing more of Bagel as of late. So interesting to kind of see these things and see how these effects that they have play out. Also, really important thing to notice is actually the ballpoint and the bow coming out. Weekends. interesting map to bring it out on. I'm honestly not sure if I agree with that choice. We'll have to see how it plays out.
It is so interesting because we know what Ice's Rays are capable of here, and maybe this isn't the exact map that you'd want to be back in farming Rays given how quickly it moves, but such an interesting choice here. All the while, everyone is immediately pushed up so far, and yeah, what did we say about this being a snowbally map? It's been, what, 1 minute? The game's already down to 27 points? Goodness gracious.
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear that these teams kind of are just fighting. That was gonna be the strategy going in. That's gonna be the strategy throughout the entire series here. I'm seeing some comments in the chat. Maybe I missed it, but Ant might be running ability doubler on his shirt. So I'm not sure if I'm getting trolled by the chat or what. But that, again, would kind of just show that the mentality that these players are coming into. I mean, Ant in particular has always been known for running some really fun games. But when you combine that Ant's personality into a match that really is just about seeding, they might just be having some fun with it type of thing. But yeah, I mean, as getting back to the gameplay here, again, it's just fights. It's just skirmishes. A lot of kind of adapting who's dead, who's not dead. Who's buying me, who's not buying me? Can we do a 2v1? Is it 2v2? Kind of trying to read all these situations as they play out.
And you know what the craziest thing about that is that's almost just the default. So often you hear about a return to neutral or a return to zero. I feel like half the time here, if somebody isn't fighting, that's when they feel most uncomfortable. As we see a nice pick there by Kyo in conjunction with that Inkjet to really take that perch away from Starburst. But it does seem like, all right, I'm fighting somebody. Now I'm not fighting. What do I do? I have to swing at something. Yeah. Where's the opponent? Someone's there. And it is just so fun to see, and it's one of the reasons why I know that there are a lot of people who talk about how fun these matches may be to watch from a strategic standpoint, maybe not. But again, it's been a battle for the middle here, as after a huge push, the last 2 minutes have sort of been a wash.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to point out is that Ice has actually been playing, when it comes to splat lanes, it isn't ballpoint Ice has really been playing. He's been playing heavy remix with Booyah, right? So I'm kind of curious what the personal or team decision was to run the ballpoint instead. Because Booyah's also, not only is it very strong in fire control, but it's also pretty strong on Musselforge in general, because it's a map with a lot of verticality, so you can take away a lot of that verticality while still covering some important areas. So there's some interesting choices here that I would love to learn more about from the teams afterwards, after the series is finished. But I really do think that's probably having an impact here, as unfortunately we're also getting a DC.
Mm-hmm. We did get a DC, and we'll have to double check with the TOs and the teams here, but I'd say this one's probably well beyond the point of no return. There are about 2 minutes left in the game, and of course well past 50, so I think Brand dives down just to make a show of it here, but I think the rest of them are probably going to sit back and let this one go the distance. Man, what a wild world where we live in, where ballpoint has fallen out of favor without a significant nerf. Like, I know you and I have talked about this in pretty much every set we cast together, but it is just wild how weapons, without getting majorly nerfed, somehow fall out of favor so quickly in these metas.
Yeah, I mean, there was one point in time where, teams were running like double, triple, 4 ballpoints and just absolutely crushing, right? So like there was one point in time where ballpoint, in my personal opinion, was the most broken weapon in the game. And during that point in time, I know some people disagreed with me and some people had other takes and so on and so forth. But regardless, it was a strong weapon, regardless of how you felt about it, whether it was broken or not. And part of the reasons why was because of the combination of being able to be an anchor weapon that provided beacons that was also one of the strongest weapons up close. So they did tune some of those abilities, made it so it wasn't as strong at fulfilling all those roles at once, but it's still really good at doing that. But like most things, a slight change in numbers makes everyone think that something's dead, and they all drop it as if it's their least favorite toy in the world. So it's definitely still strong, definitely still can be used. And not to say that, I shouldn't be picking it. I was just curious as to why he picked that over the remix that I know he's been playing a lot of.
Take a look right here. We did get Ice back in very quickly, so hopefully this just a momentary blip. We're going to be moving on to Splat Zone's Inkblot Art Academy here. Arguably the most played map and mode combination in all of NA&EU Splatoon. Certainly feels that way. But I think it's for good reason, right? There's a certain comfortability with this map that almost any team can apply.
Yeah, I really do think that, like, if you want to learn how to play splat zones, just practice Inkblot. Like, the Inkblot, I think the reason why most teams like it is because it's a fundamental map, which means there's not some sort of map niche, not sort of map obstacle that you really kind of have to deal with, or unique trait. It's not like Wahoo, we got these, choke points of the bridges and stuff. No, it's just an arena-based shooter. Here's my base, here's your base. Do you know your fundamentals, and can you execute those fundamentals? And that's what really Inkblot comes down to. And so when you take teams that love to fight, and all they have to worry about is the fundamentals and those sort of other interesting mechanics, then yeah, it's going to become a fan favorite.
Wow, and I love just how quickly you saw some very nice movement there by Bursty to get up and in the face of Ice. Ice immediately backs up, throws down the wall, calls it out, and before any real damage can be done to the base, they already take care of him. It's just that quick reaction and a double shot, some collateral. Wow. Ice saying, yeah, don't rush me here. Like, wow, okay. Okay.
I know there's definitely been some comments from people about, Ice is a historic backliner in NA, right? For a long time, and was known as a charger primarily during that, and then swapped to some of these other weapons like Swatlings and some other things. And been some comments about, when you talk about best chargers, you think Ryan, you think Power, you think Alexei, all these things. But Ice sometimes gets left out of that discussion, and I think that's just straight up robbery. They're just robbing Ice of the reputation that he deserves, because I don't think there's any other backliner in NA or EU that can flex to all the different types of backlines there is and consistently put up the same type of performance.
Yeah, consistently the same type of performance, and to do it with so many teammates as well. A lot of those players that you've named, I think, have really kind of been associated with a certain team over time. Ice, of course, had his run with FTWin, but he's played with just about everybody and still manages to put up exactly what you said there, big numbers with a number of different weapons. As we've been saying this here, though, the game has swung the other way, as it so often does here, and especially in zones so quick. Kyo really making him hurt with that, and I love the way that you see Kyo goes ahead, puts those two hits, immediately backs away as he senses the attack coming in. And even though he does go down there in a trade, it was really a 2v1 that went their way. And again, to kind of reiterate what you said, Prod, it's that understanding and that fundamental level that these players have on such a great, it's a great level.
Yeah, it's a great mechanical level, but a terrible strategical level, because during all that exchange, Starburst actually got the zone. So FTWin wasn't actually getting points for winning the game during a lot of that interaction. So, and as now as we're seeing, it allows Starburst to have more time to regroup and make another push for the zone here. And I believe with the Bombers, they are going to cap it, are probably going to put another penalty. They go 2 down in the process. I don't know what, if they're going to be able to really get map control here. At this point, they really wanted to kind of prevent the base from being swarmed, as that looks like this is the plan, but as Ice goes down. So yeah, again, a map all about the fundamentals and the fundamentals of the execution, but it looks like FTWin is really starting to get a strong foothold here.
Yeah, the foothold really is the big thing. They are all playing such mobile weapons here to where if they do engage you in a fight, as long as Biscuit is anywhere near you, that's what the aim of this comp is. Everybody can at least fight or move away and survive, and eventually that's going to allow Biscuit to roll in. Just a few seconds here, one goes down. They're going to make a hard rush here, but of course the easiest time to shark is when you know exactly where the opponent's going to be. Rand's going to have a chance here, but isn't going to be able to get a 1v2, especially when they're on both sides of the zone, and it is going to be a much more convincing performance that time from FTWin, who's now up 2-1.
Yeah, I mean, it looked like FTWin kind of won the opening fight and was able to put a lot of pressure on from that. And then the rest of the game was more or less Starburst kind of fighting from their side, which just goes to show good execution on FTWin's part overall. I called out the one slip up of, they had this extended fight where they actually didn't have the zone capped at all, but other than that, seemed to do relatively a good job. Starburst definitely did have some chances here and there, but just weren't able to make the most of those opportunities as FTWin did.
Moving on now back to the next neutral map, Rainmaker on Blackbelly Skatepark. I hesitate to throw the word neutral around here. I feel like that is the word that we have to use on this one, but Rainmaker Blackbelly. So as a team with a storied history in Rainmaker, and on this map in particular, what is it about this map, you think, that has caused it to be something that could even be remotely called a neutral in its current iteration?
Yeah, and of course, shout outs to one of the reasons why this team, or my team, has been kind of revered as a one of the best in Rainmakers. Marsh was in the chat earlier. Who obviously played a significant history at one point in time. Placed number one in solo for a month in Rainmaker. So big shout outs to Marsh. But talking about to the current state of the map, I think a lot of it comes down to the special usage that we're seeing right now. Outside of Slaughterhouse, you're not really seeing teams do things like bubbles. No one's really using ballers right now. There's none of these specials that really kind of just automatically force their way in as nature of the special. Instead, you're relying more on displacement. You're relying on missiles, stingrays, booyah bombs, things of that nature. So as a result, that means that you kind of have to fight more. And Blackbelly in particular is something where you kind of have to combine those specials to really have a big impact, unless a team makes a mistake. So it kind of ends up playing out the same way on both sides, because you need a lot of parts to make a strong push when you're kind of working with these tools.
In chat, people were talking about how they think that Rainmaker might be the mode that really starts to swing this and decide the set. Taking a look here at the comps, of course, both sides. And actually, this is going to be Biscuit on the custom Jet Squelcher. Look, I know the kid plays everything, but, like, to duel with ice, man, this is a deadly dance.
Yeah, I mean, you're dueling with one of the best at doing this in NA, right? At the same time, Biscuit and Ice are both really good friends, so I wouldn't be surprised if they've had their own 1v1 Stingray only battles. Just for the fun of it. So definitely in Ice's favor overall, but still FTWin has been extremely confident with their Rainmaker games as of late. I believe FTWin kind of views themselves as the best Rainmaker team in NA right now. And honestly, the results kind of support that. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If there is a map where Starburst can do it, though, I do believe this would be the map. This is a map where Ice can have a lot of impact, and the aggressiveness of the other members and snowball things really fast. I'm really not a big fan of taking it to the left side here, unless the play is not to make a big push initially, and to instead funnel enemy members over there to capitalize on your own Stingray, like we're seeing here. And that's kind of the play that you want to really try to do with the setup. And if they're able to make it work, it'll be great, but it's looking like it's going to kind of stall out.
Yeah, stalling out. That could have gone very poorly there. Actually, some fantastic rotation to set two people up there on that side to jump in and stop that push as it was going on. I thought that they did a great job of working Bran into a spot where he could outrange all the real threats, but again, just moving a little bit too quick. And that is one of the reasons, I think, why you have to look at some of those teams as being dominant Rainmaker teams is time, like the time dilation in Rainmaker just changes, man. If something doesn't go the way you intended it to for almost 2 or 3 seconds, it's about time to start thinking about a different idea.
Yeah. I would say Rainmaker, more than any other mode, is you get punished for not realizing that situations have changed the fastest, and therefore the most, right? If something is happening on zones and you don't realize it in time, you have a penalty to work through. It happens on TC, the tower kind of stops moving for a bit. Or, you have the checkpoints that'll kind of act as a buffer to give you time to reposition. Those things do not happen in Rainmaker. And if you are not in the right position at the right time, you will be punished for it against the best teams.
Sort of the same story that we've seen this whole time. It seems like there really hasn't been a solid hold of mid that FTWin has been able to get. You see right there again, one going down just at the foot of their doorstep before Rainmaker can even reset. And I think that this also shows a bit of the respect that FTWin does have. The fact that there hasn't been just a hugely concerted effort to throw your specials in the middle to gain control, because they haven't had the opportunity. One's always been down, or they've had to use their specials on the defensive side. And this Ray, if it goes big, might end the game right here.
Yeah, the juniors, Bert's junior is going to be able to pop an armor, but it's not going to save Biscuit from the Stingray. But at the same time, the Rainmaker does go down. However, this might be enough where a couple more picks could really snowball this. They don't really seem like they're happening, and instead FTWin is instead getting their specials out as a result, forcing Starburst out. But, I mean, we're a minute and 30 left. about in this game, and it's, you know, still only 90 to 55. This is still a very close game. Really, one push still could end it, and for either team, really not a safe lead at all for Starburst here. Again, the running it to the left, I'm not really sure why. I don't really agree, but, you know, if Brand's going to make plays like that, then it's not going to matter, right? As again, we're having this huge push. I don't know if the respawns are going to come in time, and they don't. So, yeah, it works. I'm not sure if good for them.
I mean, well, look, we've been talking so much about, like, you have to be able to react in the moment, identify what the threat is, and go there. I guess at that point, Bran was just blazing a trail, and to get two very quick picks like that while the Rays were dancing on the other side, you saw that Kyo was going after the Rainmaker in the middle at that point, too, or at least had been before that whole scramble started to happen. I think the call was just, hey, there can't be anybody immediately on left, and if I get far enough down half pipe, maybe I can pick a couple out as they're coming from spawn. Maybe they've gotten a little bit of damage from the Ray, and yeah, Bran does what Bran has been doing since Splatoon 1, day one.
Yeah, so there's two things I want to point out. First, I want to give a brief lesson on probabilities, right? I promise this is not going to be a quiz. I'm not going to throw lingo out. Just stay with me for 1 second, right? And in competitive games like this, a lot of things boil down to, you know, we got two teams of relatively equal skill level. You know, who's going to win? And what your goal and strategy is, let's put ourselves in a situation where even if we're only winning 60% of our fights, that means we're going to win 60% of our games, which means we'll eventually win the match, right? And you obviously want to try to push that as much as possible, 80-20, 90-10, that type of thing. Pushing left, so that's the first thing I want to bring up, is that this is kind of the overall fundamental level approach these teams are going to kind of work with. So the other thing I want to point out is, one of the things I mentioned during that match is being at the right place at the right time. The reason why pushing left is never good is because it's really easy to be in the right place at the right time if you're on defense. FTWin didn't do that, and Brand punished it. So even though if I was to throw out a random number of, only 10% of pushes to the left win, Brand capitalized on that 10% and got a KO because of it.
Prod said that would not be on the quiz, but he's wrong, actually. The quiz will be emailed to every single one of you after this, so I hope you paid attention and took good notes. The lecture is on, and on again now. We are back to Inkblot Art Academy, and we have tower control. Let's see what they learned from their last one.
Yeah, and again, snowballing is going to be the key objective here, especially on a map like Inkblot, where it's easy to get deep into the base really fast. We're going to see a lot of challenges, a lot of things like this, where Ice is fighting an Inkjet on the tower, and he doesn't get off the tower right away. Instead, he tries to shoot at it first. So this is a lot of what we're going to see until one team starts to get some decisive wins.
Some decisive wins, and I know that this is nothing new, and this has been a long time coming, and it's been going on for a while, but it's so crazy to see any sort of tower control match be played without a Booyah Bomb, without a Stingray. The game has changed, my friends. The game has changed.
It has. As speaking of change, as Starburst goes 3 down and coming off the respawn and FTWin is deep into the base, the whole map has now changed and is deeply in the favor of yellow currently.
Going down there as Ice Punch is here, but he laid it out right there. Deeply yellow, not to be confused with deep purple. It's going to be...
Or deep blues.
Or deep blues. Yeah, there's deep everything. I love it. I love it. But you can see here that even though the initial push has stopped, the pressure has not. Inkjet's going everywhere, but Kyo is sitting right at their doorstep, ready to punish anyone who overextends or tries to get around behind that tower. And I think that's really the role that isn't always the sexiest to play in these, is making sure that your tower is safe from the back end. And now that that has been assured, Kyo gets to move up and attack and play the game he wants to play. At this point, Ice is desperately trying to slow this down. Kyo splashdowns and gets killed for it. And finally, the pressure is off a little bit, but all the way down to 20. And again, it just happens so fast. Now it's 2 down the other way. You're probably going to see a couple people jump out, try to maintain a little control. But I would not be surprised whatsoever if Starburst does the exact same thing back.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see here, though, is that Starburst has opted to kind of stay in the middle of the map because there was one person left alive on FTWin's side, so they didn't want to push too far up and have that person potentially flank and the push alone. which is kind of the opposite of what FTWin did earlier, right? As soon as they won big fight, they won one big fight. They had a couple members push in deep right away, and they left some of the other members to clean up mid. So some two interesting choices there that both have their pros and cons. As you see it kind of play out, as Starburst is now able to make a big push. And you know, in Starburst, they were in deep fire, right? They were deep in there as FTWin was making a big push, and they're starting to claw their way back, but fall just short.
They did fall just short, and there was a really key moment there where, to go back to your point of the right place at the right time, that was a situation where I think that there were the right people there to stop FTWin's counterattack from taking that tower. There were two people who were clearly ready and firing in the right direction, but I think a combination of maybe a bomb or two and some armor, very timely armor, was enough there to slow that one down, because
Keo landed the splash down.
He did, and he got a pick off of it too. I don't believe it. This is crazy things happening here at TASL. Things you never thought could possibly happen.
A splashdown has landed. Everyone, get your tweets ready. Oh man, and that's just the warning bell is that, oh no, FTWin landed the splashdown. As again, Keo's the last one alive. He goes for a second one, does not get a kill, but lands it. Can he get the cleanup? Does get the chase and cleanup. Oh no, this is not boding well.
Nobody can believe it here. Forget the rest of the games. This is already just bonkers here. Whew. Okay, to the earlier point though, what I was getting at is sometimes you are in the right spot, then that's where the execution part comes in. That is why, that's why this is a game and not just a quiz, because you can be in the right place at the right time, still got to hit the shots in.
Yeah, but this game's definitely still not over yet, as we're seeing this big fight play out, and Starburst is able to create a small opening here. So Starburst, they are down by 10, but they have cleared all of the checkpoints. So if FTWin isn't able to stop them early on in the push, they're going to have to die for tower at the last second here to try to prevent them from Starburst from regaining the lead. The junior does go down, not before it gets its armor off, which is the really main purpose of the junior here. It allow this Inkjet to come in, but is it enough? We're seeing a lot of trades.
We are seeing a lot of trades, and they're all going the other way. Kyo's going to have to get rid of all of them, and I don't think he's even going to get close to the tower. It gets taken down 20, 19, 18, and they will be on the tower as it expires. All the specials being thrown at the tower there. A great Inkjet there by Biscuit that was able to get two, but the last one who was able to sneak away punished Biscuit on the landing, and that just left Toon alive to try and take the tower. Could not pull it off, and a 3-2 lead right now for Starburst.
Yeah, one thing to point out is that that splashdown had armor, so I guess it was actually not a good omen after all. I apologize for that one, chat. I don't have audio right now, so I wasn't able to hear that armor come in. I debated us all. But yeah, I guess a splashdown landing and getting a kill, if it has armor, it just doesn't count. And I guess FTWin was going to need at least two of those. And unfortunately, I was not able to make that happen to pull out the win. But a fantastic, honestly, performance by Starburst to hold on to that really aggressive push. I mean, Ice was sitting there basically by the KO point for like a solid 15, 20 seconds, just stalling, trying to do whatever he can while the rest of his team was duking it out over on their plat. And they held on and was able to come back at the end. So some really good, what I call bending but not breaking moments.
Bending but not breaking, and you brought up something really important, I think, right at the start of that push where things really started to turn, where both of the armors went out, and you talked about being able to use the armor early on in the push to really move people out of the way and to kind of take that spot. You saw that Bursty used his at the same time too, but by the time that his armor was there, he had already taken damage because Jared had moved up and was armored, and that really was what started that whole thing. Is yes, the armor got off, but when the junior was out of that fight, it was going to take entirely too long for the junior to get back into a spot where they could contribute. And it's a junior. The junior doesn't have the easiest time entering the field of battle as it is. So yeah. I think, again, just the subtle timing of the armor, having your team with the armor first before the opponent can get set up with theirs, it's the minutia, man. That's what it takes at this level.
Yeah, and you'll hear some teams talk about timings, right? So what that means is that they're aware of okay, if they're playing a junior can paint this much. It can usually get an armor in about 20 seconds from nothing if it's prioritizing that, right? So you have to kind of consider that, okay, they're also farming in for an inkjet, they're doing an armor inkjet, and kind of keeping track of all these things of when is the armor actually going to come out, and is it going to come out soon enough? Can I take advantage of that? And so really good players will kind of keep track of those type of things during the game. And a prime example of that, yeah, the armor came off, but not before the key inkjet timer matched up, allowing Jared to push up aggressively and make that play that started that snowball. But enough about Inkblot. We're going into Wahoo zones here. And even though FTWin gets the zone to start here, they were losing members, but they're still maintaining control.
They are maintaining control, and that's another inkjet that's fallen and gotten punished here. And I think as we go back and look at this set, one of the things that we can really kind of break down and talk about is just how much difficulty some of these inkjets have had. I mean, we all know what Inkjet's been able to do. It's terrorizing the scene probably since day one. But it's become this other battle where suddenly in the middle of it, 3 people aren't on the ground doing things anymore, and it's just there's such an interesting dynamic as Brand does land and get another pick on one of the others. But this many inkjets, I think, it's just so wild to see again, especially in something like Splat Zones.
Everyone is making a big deal about a Toon coming and bursting out his L3. But Brand's coming in and says, look, I have my own L3, and you're not the king of this weapon anymore. I am now the Nozzle Nose Master, and make some huge plays. It's interesting of note too is that because FTWin doesn't really run backline comps, you play this big, wide open map with these long lines of sight. It really makes it so Starburst has an advantage running a backline comp. And I'm wondering how much of an impact that's having because meanwhile, Brand just says, you can make a push as deep as you want. I'm just going to clean you up afterwards.
Oh my god, I think that was Jared again. It happened so quickly and he was squidbagging on the way back. I couldn't even see the name, but yeah, Brand went up to the fight and realized that the battle had already been won. Goodness gracious, 4-2 here for Starburst, and again, a very convincing victory.
Yeah. Really, I'm not surprised by the result of that one, but at the same time, solid performance. Again, Starburst really was just kind of well positioned. I know they lost the opening fight, but outside of that, it was pretty much their game for the rest of the way. Okay, so enough about Starburst, right? So they've won 3 in a row, and they're now 4-2. FTWin has their backs against the wall. They cannot lose another one, and they have to win out. They have to win out. They have to win the last 3 games, 2 of which are TC games, right? So definitely something that's in their favor to at least get up to 4-4. I would take FTWin overall if I was to pick a team in tower control games, especially looking at Mako Mart. Ancho-V, that one might be tough. They've kind of struggled on that one recently, specifically against Slaughterhouse, and I looked back and watched the VOD specifically that apparently they lost it because they weren't warmed up. But there's no excuse for that now. So they have to win it now, and hopefully they can pull it out. Just to stay alive and see if we can get a 9-game set going.
One of the few 9-game sets that would even be in this event. It's been a lot of, some of the analysts and casters were talking about how we've all been kind of shell-shocked away from picking things like 5-4 for sets because of how many absolute steamrolls we've seen over the course of this from a number of different teams, but this would certainly be the set to see a 5-4 if it was going to happen. 2 TC games, as you said, before we can even start talking about the next Splat Zones. I'm curious here, based on Ancho-V, and I know you talked about really no excuse either way, what is Biscuit going to go?
If I was a gambling man, which, I don't play a lot of Zooters these days, so I don't gamble that much anymore. I would still bet the Nautilus, and I would have been right. I probably would have made a penny off of my $1 bet. So, but yeah, I mean, FTWin pretty much sticking relatively to what they've been running most of the set. Starburst running basically the same thing as well. I believe Ant's still running ability doubler, so I don't know how much of this is a meme at this point or what. But yeah, so like FTWin's definitely not out of this yet. I would still, even though they lost against Slaughterhouse in this map the other day, wow. how the heck did they turn that one around? Holy crap! It's just a bloodbath in the middle of this map right now.
Like, two armored players go after Bran. One goes down, and sure, okay, your jumping gets taken out. Now you're down. All right. You know, take a rest.
The camera legit cannot keep up with the amount of splats that are happening right now.
Huge shots from Ice, who really has become the stabilizing force amongst all this. Like, eventually people are landing and jumping in. Someone's going to have to come eventually, but I feel like that little moment there, that little microcosm was exactly what this set has been. Two armored players go after Bran as Jared takes a tumble off the map. Not only does Bran survive, but the two picks go the other way. And you said, how did they turn that around? That has been the theme of the set.
Yeah, and honestly, it's been a minute and almost 20 seconds of just pure chaos, and yet somehow Ice is, as a charger, living amongst that chaos. So, some insane plays coming out from both teams so far. It's ever so slightly in Starburst's favor, but this next checkpoint, this is the big checkpoint of Ancho-V. One of the easiest spots to defend, so making it one of the hardest checkpoints to push through. Ice does go down to Keo, not without trading him out, and this might be enough to let FTWin kind of control their side. Now it's going to come down to, okay, who has used specials, who hasn't, where are their openings, who's lurking, sharking in places. Those are the things right now that the teams are going through. They're kind of checking all these different corners and to kind of work their way in or out of the map. So it looks like FTWin's ever so slightly inching forward, but it's not without a lot of contention from Starburst.
Yeah, that big pick on Ice is going to open things up. Keo's going to be able to safely move forward and throwing out the splashdown just because he has it there, maybe hoping somebody would drop, but maybe a little bit too haphazardly on Bran. Bran might clean both up, does not, and actually now FTWin started to take pretty solid control there. Toon going down, Keo should be able to jump in at the time, and Biscuit's in a position where they have to be careful about trying to move up. Was not able to get the pick right there. Very close to Inkjet as well. If they can keep the tower here for Biscuit to get his Inkjet, they're going to have an opportunity to break through. But I love the way that Starburst is very quickly and cleanly moving back, continuing to throw things at the tower. But look at that, they've had to move too far back in order to stay alive.
Yeah, Ice making a huge pick right there to stop the tower from pushing forward, and then unfortunately only so many splashdowns are allowed to legally land in a single match, Keo. I'm sorry that your splashdown has been denied, and I think that's going to be the end of the push here for now. But Keo has been, you know, as I mentioned earlier, FTWin has their backs against the wall, right? They cannot lose this match. They have to win out. As a result, I feel like Keo's playing even more aggressive than what he was at the start of the match. There was a couple instances during that last minute of exchanges where it felt like he was really just kind of diving straight for Ice on the backline and trying to take out this man center, if you will, for Starburst. And it kind of led to some of their big pushes. But as I say that, that was a team wipe for a brief instance. All four members of FTWin went down. This is it for Starburst to capitalize.
It is, and you see Toon has to come out here and fight, but that's not a fight that you're going to win straight up against the CDS. They've stacked up one way. They're trying to put anything they can on the tower. Ice still alive, still dancing. Finally, Toon jumps down because that's the only, nothing else was working clearly. Wow. And another shot from Bran, just enough damage. They're going to be jumping in here, Prod. They're almost through this final checkpoint and no one's alive.
Ice is going to call skill on that one. I know a lot of people are going to call lag, but huge props for Ice. I mean, that was really well done. He positioned himself perfectly around that tower pole in a way that made it impossible for those shooters to hit him. So really, really well done, at least from the spectator's point of view. Some fantastic play coming out from both sides. But it looks like Starburst was just more prepared overall for this matchup today. Again, Bran popping off as he did on a lot of games this set. But it just kind of shows the nature that strategically there isn't a lot of variety happening in these games. It's just fighting, and whoever ends up winning most of the fights usually wins the game for a lot of these NA teams. FTWin's not a bad team. Obviously, they're top two for the NA side, and they're making it out now officially as the number 2 seed going into the bracket. So it's not like FTWin's, you know, just is on a lower level or anything like that. It was just that Starburst was performing better today. And it could honestly be, given the nature of how mechanically heavy performance-wise these results are impacted by the time the bracket comes around, FTWin could be the better team because they're just playing better on that day. That's really what this kind of level of play is at right now. Personally speaking, I'm not the biggest fan of it, but at the same time, if it leads to fun matches like this to watch, then, no complaints here.
No complaints. And, we've been talking about Brandon Ice, and we've briefly discussed Jared, but enough can't be said about Jared coming in here. First time, if I read his tweet correctly earlier, his first set that he has played with the team in TASL since week 1. And it is not easy to immediately turn back to the same level. It's one thing to be in shape, but in top shape to play against a team like FTWin and to execute properly the entire time. Just astounding the way that he was able to come back in and contribute to Starburst and firing on all cylinders. Like you said, Prod, this week, this set, this match, Starburst was better. I can't wait to see what FTWin's response is.
Yeah, and to add on to that, some other anomalies. One, as far as I know, this was the only match Toon has played in for all of TASL. So, even though Starburst was having Jared come in again for the first time since the first week, I think this was Toon coming in for the first time at all for TASL, unless I'm mistaken. And then another anomaly is that, I really do believe, I think, if I can believe chat, which chat could be debating me just as much as I've debated them with the splashdown, I think Ant really was running ability doubler for most, if not all, of that of these games that we just watched. So, some little caveats, some little okay buts and ands, but at the end of the day, the scoreboard says 5-2 for Starburst.
It does. Yeah, 5-2 for Starburst, and I know any of those ands and buts, FTWin, not the type of team to focus on those. They've been in positions where they've lost big sets before. I'm almost certain they're going to look at this and come back, but God, I would love to go back and watch that set and just watch the Inkjets. Because when I think of FTWin and their big dominant games that they've had against some of these other teams, it seems like oftentimes Biscuit's Inkjet is enough to completely turn situations, and I don't know if it's just a matter of Starburst being able to play around Inkjets better than any team that we've seen, if maybe Biscuit was, just not executing on the same level, a combination of both, whatever it may be. They played around it so well, and I think that FTWin has gotten a lot of mileage when they're running their no backline comp out of combining something like missiles or a few bombs, or throw a bomb, use your armor, throw a bomb, and then Biscuit using his Inkjet to stop objective pushes, to set up a spot where they say you can't pass, and go there. This time, that was not getting them nearly as much mileage. I'm sure part of it, of course, always dangerous to do that against a sniper like Ice, but it really felt like every time we talk about Stingray battles, it was the Inkjet battles this time, and Ram was really controlling the skies this time around.
Yeah, I mean, when we brought up Inkjets, it was... I think it was all Brand. I don't think we really mentioned any sort of key inkjets from anyone else. So it kind of just shows, just from that alone, that just the level of impact was higher for Brand today than it was for Biscuit. And that's the nature of this style. If you live or die by the inkjet, guess what? Part of that statement is die, and it's going to cost you sometimes. So, I mean, it may sound simple, but then you get, if you say that going into the match, live or die by the inkjet, and it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And then you go 5-2, and you go, how did this happen? How did reigning a bajillion time reigning champs FTWin just lose? I don't understand. Well, we knew what was going to happen. Live or die. There's always that chance there, and Starburst really, really took advantage of it.
They do bleed. They do bleed.
And as I said from the beginning, they've been bleeding more lately. All the top teams across the board, and they have been bleeding more often as of late. So, to me, this isn't that shocking of a result. I maybe would have expected it to be game number wise, maybe a little bit closer, but still high level of play, just mechanically based. So whatever team is individually playing better today, which Starburst had Brand, had a significant impact on the result of this series overall.
And to kind of give everybody a bit of scope here for this, FTWin is going to be playing against Freeze in the first round of their playoffs. And that is astounding. Freeze, of course, with a dominating run through the EU side of things. They will be playing the number 2 seed in NA, which, after today's match, is FTWin. That's going to be a heck of a firefight right from the get-go. Yeah. And then, of course, on the other side, it is going to be Rift that will be playing against Starburst, so the number 1 and number 2 from NA and EU, respectively.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, at least to the start of TASL, I think a lot of people kind of figured the FTWin would be in there. I think a lot of people kind of figured Starburst would be in there for the NA side. EU was a little bit more of a toss-up. Again, this is all before TASL started, so looking at teams before TASL started and seeing how they would play out. But now, halfway through and out towards the end, I think a lot of people were kind of thinking FTWin versus Freeze is what was going to be the finals, especially as Freeze continued to ramp up energy and wins as the TASL season progressed. However, FTWin hasn't had that same level of kind of, improvement or domination as the games go on. So right now we're kind of looking at like Freeze seems to be kind of the fan favorite and maybe the number one favorite overall from EU, if not the whole tournament. Whereas FTWin's kind of slid a little bit. So now we're going to end up seeing FTWin versus Freeze early on and not in the finals, as a lot of people may have thought. But who knows? That could be the match that really determines the tournament. A lot remains to be seen, and a lot of fantastic Splatoon has yet to be played.
Prod, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I almost never look at chat during the sets, but I did tune in there towards the end, and people so complimentary towards your commentary, and it really is a pleasure to get to work with you in the situations that we do. And thank you for responding to my requests less than 24 hours before these sets.
Of course, yeah. I mean, I don't do this very often, and honestly, being completely honest to both you and to chat, I'm picky. When I do this, it's gonna be because I view it as actually worth my time. So there's a lot of things that I don't actually accept in terms of being offered chances to commentate and stuff like that. But in a situation like this, where we're going to see, a kind of a region-defining match, and be able to kind of give some insights on that, I know I have a reputation for being kind of strong-worded and being kind of blunt, and obviously that will, gel well with others and gel not with others, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, a lot of the teams kind of view these things the same way. I'm just the only one that's just kind of being upfront about it. So it's just fun to see these things and fun to see it play out. And I really, at the end of the day, all I'm doing is I want to promote and push for the growth of this game, because it really does have the potential to be a fantastic esport if the community supports it. So matches like this are definitely the way to do it. So big shouts out to TASL and all the viewers that have been turning in and watching in all these matches, even during these crazy times. It wouldn't be possible without these things.
Absolutely. And Power has please requested that you commentate their scrims. I don't know.
I don't know if they could handle that. I would be brutally honest, especially because they're my own team.
Oh man, that is brutal. Tudos asking for the nearest retirement home, so I don't know who either that Power fellow or that Tudos person is, but they sound like okay people. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining in today. Prod, do you have any closing thoughts before we send this out? I need to find somebody to raid, so go ahead.
Yeah, I can ramble for a bit while you find someone. So first of all, Tudos has already found the retirement home. It's been in Stone Shadow all along, just like everything else that's Way of the Hero. So you're already living there, buddy. Other shout outs. Big shout outs to all of the TASL teams. Again, I think there was a lot of being very broad and general. So this obviously does not apply to everyone. I think there was a lot of unnecessary comments about the skill level of some of the quote-unquote bottom teams of TASL. Obviously, just being upfront, being Coach Slaughterhouse, and one of those teams that was kind of viewed towards the bottom. There was this, why are they there? Like, there's other teams that are better. They've been losing this, they've been losing that, yada, yada, yada. Don't ever count anyone out. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes that teams like to keep private that impact these types of things. So, in general, let's try to bring everyone up while being fair to everyone. It's always best to be fair, but try to bring people up rather than bring them down. Overall, we found, even if the results ended up being mostly in placement-wise relatively to where people kind of expected, the journey of how we got there was anything but. So for both sides, not just NA but and EU, there's new talent coming up all the time. There's old talent that gets worse and then comes back. You can never make solid predictions. always take everything that you see from the talking heads with a grain of salt, including myself. So in general, just be there to support the teams that are playing at the highest levels and give them the respect that they currently deserve. And then if they roll around in the mud later, point and laugh. That's okay.
You heard it here. Prod has given you permission to point and laugh.
Only if they're rolling around in the mud and they're like very blatantly saying, "Hey, look at us, we're rolling around in the mud." But yeah, so I'm more or less rambling. I'm being very abstract right now, but do you need me to ramble more, or have you found someone?
No, I have found somebody, and to build on what you've talked about too, with some of these teams and the journey that some of these teams take is, I think a lot of times from a spectator standpoint, and even from a commentator standpoint, you become so accustomed to seeing certain things end a certain way. One team has been dominant for so long. The established hierarchy has been this. Yeah, the narratives too, but I think even, sometimes when you look at the sheets and look at all these different things, it becomes so easy to, I think, say, well, it's been like this for so long. And you forget sometimes that, these players are still trying. They're still practicing. These teams are still developing. There's always new parts. And I think sometimes the discussion of that consistent grind gets lost. The level of NA is, as you said, maybe not what it was before. But if you take and look at like where these teams were compared to when they first formed, or the personal developments that these players have made, it's always changing, even if the ultimate, or even if the final result of a set doesn't change. And I think that's, the brutal thing about competition is at the end of the day, one team has to win and one team has to lose. And all the other subplots get washed away in the crucible and the cleansing fires of a best-of-5 set. And so I think, if there's one thing to take away from not only today's set, because some people would have viewed it as an upset, but also as this tournament as a whole, there's always going to be changes. And sometimes, focus less on being right and focus more on just enjoying the game and learning what you can. Because I want to believe that most of us are here because we enjoy Splatoon. I don't know, maybe there's some contractual obligations.
I'm here because I hate it. I'm trying to ruin it.
There we go. I appreciate the honesty as always, Prod, but seriously, thank you to all the players who've committed for this. I know we still have the playoffs, but it is not easy to organize these amongst the players and make sure that a minimum of 8 people, not counting anybody in production or any subs, can get together to do this. Leagues are very, very difficult, and they always have been, which is why we've seen an iteration of TASL go by and end in the middle of it. So thank you to the players here for not only all their continued efforts in playing, but also just the fact that they were willing to stick around for all of these games over all of these weeks. But also to the viewers, also to everybody on the production staff. I know that you're going to hear this entire bit many more times over the course of playoffs and after that ends too. But it does take a village. It is a community effort to make these sort of things happen. And so, like Prod said, let's lift each other up. We cannibalize ourselves far too quickly around here, methinks.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think a really good example, and just to kind of recap, I know we gotta sign off here, but around this time a year ago, I want to say, there was these rumblings of this up and coming team that people were doubting at the time whether they could really reach that top. That team was Sayo and Sayonara, and now they've disbanded during TASL, and it's not because they got bad, just because other things came up. Life things happen, other interests come up, things change. So good or bad, skill level wise, there's a lot of other things going on that are happening behind the scenes that not everyone is aware of. So just try to keep that in mind as we try to judge teams solely based off of their in-game performance.
All right. Well, everybody, we are going to raid. Who else were we going to raid? Of course, we're raiding Nude. It's just natural here. Kiva raided us. Sendo raided us. We got to throw it all the way back the other way. But thank you again, everybody, for joining in for today's set. I hope that you enjoyed the set. From what I'm hearing, it sounds like you did. And thank you, everybody, for sticking with us here for NA Week 6 FTWin versus Starburst. Congratulations to Starburst, who will be taking home the win today, as well as first seed in North America. FTWin will get their chance at revenge, provided they continue to win and move up.